Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei met Igvild Leviathan in rias peerage and fallen in love? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Kerlongsj Evert Orlejov for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. There were times in life when things got crazy around you and when the world had calmed down. For Igvild Leviathan, such a time was the present she lived in. Lots had happened during the short time that she had awakened from her slumber. She had seen the ocean again, Issei had saved her from the dangers that her powers could bring, and now, she had been reincarnated by him. After all that, it came as little surprise to herself that she had started to fall for Issei, a man who selflessly had risked his life to save her. One could call it fate that she had been taken into his household as his queen. She had to admit that life could only look up from this point. Igvild had set herself down one evening. With this many women, wanting a piece from Issei, there were times when some women decided to take care of themselves, or sleep alone, which is what she did at this point. Sitting in her own room, with a laptop, she had a lot of catching up to do on all the entertainment she had missed in the last eons. Not that she'd ever really fully catch it, but a girl could try. One of the things that she had found back was looking up the shows that Issei had starred in, and the ones that revolved around those. She had found back a video that greatly interested her, if only for the name. Igvild Leviathan, made by Igvild Leviathan. Why Issei, also known as the If Issei dragon, had those videos of his biggest rivals saved up. Igvild would never know, but she found there was more on the videos, and Issei had been so kind for her to have those videos saved up on this device. So she didn't mind watching those videos. They were maybe made for kids, but that didn't stop her from enjoying them. Binging had been something that she loved doing now, and when one episode closed, she went over to the folders on the device. There had been something she noticed on it. There was another folder of the location. But it was weird, as the other episodes were just ranked in order of season. Why would Issei make an extra folder? She didn't know what she had to imagine from it, as unlike previous episodes, there was no just a mention of special, deluxe episodes. Seeing those open, nothing was displayed on the thumbnails. It was a black screen, and there wasn't a name of an episode but just a number, starting from 1 and descending from there. It invoked the curious sense in her, and so without delaying it, she opened the first video. As soon as the video began, her eyes widened as she witnessed the scene on the screen. There was no opening from the usual theme song, nothing bombastic. Instead, it was like a camera was put on and placed on a shelf. "You sure about this, Igvild?" There was no mistaking this was the voice of Issei. It had something of a boyish uncertainty in it. "Of course I am. Why shouldn't we?" Issei turned back from the camera, and Igvild felt her cheeks grow bright red. The dragon was completely, and even that of his looked delicious. "This can get dangerous. If this gets leaked," Igvild scoffed at the remark, "what are people going to do? We'd be rolling in profit for those who like it, and those who don't, well, That language surprised Igvild when she heard Igvild cuss. The queen could see the body of Igvild Leviathan. She wasn't as big as her sister Sona, easily a head shorter, but damn, those were than she guessed. "Well, I rather you." There was something in Issei's voice. Not his usual bright laughing style. Something darker, drier, and no nonsense. He joined Igvild on the, making sure that his was fully there. The diva felt her fall open as she saw the size of Issei. Oh, she didn't make illusions. She knew that Issei had quite an active life. There was more than one reason why she didn't share his room just yet, but she could never imagine that a woman like Igvild or Rias would be able to take that full organ in their bodies and be fine. Still, it was a good thing that I was thinking of you when I needed relief. Ing the woman. Issei cupped that face while Igvild relented and just relaxed as she let Issei take over. The Gru and Igvild could see how their S connected while his hands began to grope on those. His thumb stroked over the hardening S. "You could have just asked me. You just slammed me against the door, and we started to have fun." It appeared it wasn't the first time that Issei had been doing something naughty with Igvild. "Oh yeah? Would you want to start with the same of that?" Issei nodded eagerly, and so he lowered himself, right between the of Igvild. "Oh. This feels so good." Igvild looked down on her own pair of S. Would that be a problem? She imagined how the more gifted women in his harem were able to do that. Aquino or Rias would have no problem putting that. How could she even think like that? Why would she even think like that? She continued to watch the scene and saw how Igvild had started to press the together, making escape impossible. Even if Issei wanted that, Igvild doubted that he would have that in mind. "Just let your S work, dragon boy. Give me that cream." In and out, Issei was just slamming at the highest possible speed while his head came out and said hi to her. The Satan began to while Issei began to even more in the body as he was desperate. This was too weird. Yet, she couldn't look away. She couldn't stop watching it. She watched how the S of Serafal were used as little more than just a tool for Issei's. It appeared that Serafal didn't mind that one bit. That knowing, there was even more intense and around his head when it came out that Igvild was making mental notes on what she would do with Issei when she had him between. Why did her mind even come to that conclusion? Why would she even think of doing this? She watched how Serafal did those S and her around his thrashing. That was amazing. You're getting better at it. Serafal smirked back at Issei with an impish grin while Issei just lowered his to her lower. Serafal teased as Issei lowered himself. Right back at you. Igvild couldn't believe that Serafal was able to take that in one and keep it there. That must have hurt, but from the facial expression, Serafal had no problems. That echoed over the place and Igvild shut it down, really fast. That was so weird. So wrong. But so. Igvild couldn't figure out the right word for it. That was the word that she heard Aquino and Zenobia use when they talked about this sort of stuff. It was so freaking. Her curiosity had been unsated, so there was no stopping her from going after the second video. It had been the same as before. Issei turned on the camera and before he was fully ready and able, Sarah followed the dragon and threw him on the. Igvild had expected a growl coming from Issei, but it came as a surprise for the queen that it was Serafal who made that animalistic noise. I swear. If you hadn't stopped me. Serafal pretty much tore the magical girl suit off. I told you that the idea of me being the damsel in distress didn't sit right. Issei wanted to veer back up but found that it was best not to argue more with a woman who could tear your clothes off. Shut your. Right now, I don't need you to open that again. I just need your. Pumping that shaft up and down. It was incredibly aggressive on what Serafal wanted from Issei, and it appeared that it worked on making Issei. He shuddered at the grasp that Serafal was using on him. Despite the order she had just given him, Issei decided to open his. If you are going to be mad, fine. If you are going to me, also fine. But for the love of everything, ease up the grip. You need me hard, not ripped off. Igvild hadn't seen Issei angry or worked up, but it appeared that he was quite capable of that. What did I say? Keep quiet. I know what I am doing. Igvild saw no reason to doubt the words of Serafal as Issei had grown to his usual size. She could see how big Issei really was in this S, and again, she gulped if Serafal could take that in. But it was she who up on his, using one hand to steady it, and she slammed it right of her. Inch by inch, slid into Serafal who could in delight. Her face was nearly animalistic, while Issei had been ing. She had never imagined that he could look that defeated and outmatched. The Maun knew exactly what she was doing. Her hands were steadying the body with those on his chest. She looked utterly and completely content with the feeling of Issei's piercing through her. Igvild got one confirmation from the video. Two, actually. One. Issei's was than she had expected to be. Two. Women could take a like that and still be able to live. Oh, that is snug. Serafal knew exactly how to push his arms and make his toes curl as his D through her. Igvild wondered how she could make Issei like that as he lay beneath her. His S were ing in the sheets and his hung out. You look so adorable. So cute. See, you are perfect for the damsel. Igvild didn't know if she would ever see Issei as cute, but that thought was thrown out when she saw the grimace on his face. Getting up, Serafal had no time to react to Issei's quick change of pace. I'm the damsel? I'll show you what I am made of. The dragon wouldn't let her dictate how this was going to work. Pinning her with one arm, Serafal bucked underneath him as she tried to squirm away from him, but the power behind the other hand when he groped her left, made her. You're going to learn what it is to piss me off. His S began to stroke up and down, with a ferocious speed which caused the mouth to like a cheap whore. Igvild wasn't sure if she had ever wanted to see Issei that mad, but she couldn't deny that it looked really good. Serafal's body must have been sensitive from the ing that she was receiving, his so deep in her, his right hand playing with those S and her own that were still forced above her head while he continued to work her over. Oh. Let me go. Issei. Let me. Oh. Good. So ing. Issei didn't utter a single word. Not even a or groan from him. His face was an impassive mask, his eyes just focused on making Serafal squeal. He didn't let her go, his entire body was making sure that she remained pinned beneath his body and that she couldn't get out. Igvild began to see what would happen if someone made Issei really mad. The normally, cheerfully, happy guy changed into a stone-faced, Ice-cold man that you didn't want angry at you. And here was the scary part. He clearly loved Serafall, but that didn't stop him from being absolutely pissed at her. He just kept on ing her silly and making her scream. So he kept on going, continuing to make her scream as he kept on pumping those s. Igvild found that she had seen more than enough of that show. So it was time to close the video. Note to future self. When and not if, when, you decide to let Issei take you, keep him happy. She had heard the stories from Serafall from others, and with the things she had seen, Igvild would not be shy to admit that the Mao had outclassed her, in nearly category. That meant being in a stronger body, as she wasn't sure that would be able to handle a fully angry and/or Issei. Igvild decided to continue watching the videos that Issei and Serafall had made. When she said on the next video, she couldn't imagine why her left hand had traveled down to her underwear. She didn't even need the confirmation. She could feel that both sets of had been leaking s, and her hand had just stroked her own body to find some sort of relief. It just came as she began to feel more and more from the videos, and the next nearly made her, from just the image alone. Unlike the previous two, it wasn't Issei who turned on the camera but his partner, Serafall, who made the device work. What made the scene even weirder was the fact that Serafall wasn't, but she was wearing her magical girl outfit. "I can't believe you made me wear this." There had been a grumble in her words as Issei had been waiting for her to come to. "Ah! You wanted to know which last episode did better. I can't help it that mine outclasses yours," Serafall cursed under her breath. She had known that between her and Issei, it could always get tricky to see who would win, but again, the Ipei dragon beat her out. So in this small bet, the losing party had to dress up in the character of the show. So that meant that Serafall would have to wear the magical girl outfit. Issei was all ready, and it appeared that his had grown to the usual length again. "Now come here." Serafall rolled her eyes and made her way to the. Issei jumped up from it, and forced her to stand behind it so her was shown to him. "Now get into it. Come on." Serafall felt her cheeks heat up and her core clench. If her younger fans could see this, oh, it would be a never-ending press nightmare. This show could never be watched by kids. That was something she couldn't change. Serafall imagined that a few personal friends would find this scene to be very amusing, especially her younger sister. If she could get past her prudeness, Grafia and Surzex, she couldn't say about this show, although the ultimate queen had a ed-up sense of humor. Issei flipped her skirt away to reveal a set of white panties, clinging on that bountiful. "You are a manipulative son of a." The rest of the words were cut off by a muscled arm that went into the air, and with the right calculation, Issei brought it down on the right cheek. The slap was pretty loud, and Issei could see how the jiggled and bounced underneath that underwear. "If you don't offer yourself, Leviathan, I am going to do more to you." Serafall had never been this humiliated in her entire life. Usually, she was the one who made others squirm with embarrassment and make them sweat. Now, it was Issei who was doing it to her. "You really think that?" There was another on her. It was shorter than the previous one, but that didn't mean that it was any less powerful. "Last warning?" Issei's voice grew dark and hoarse, just like the previous video. Serafall glared back at him, but it wasn't the best idea to do with Issei, who was raring to go, in more ways than one. "I am not going to." The last word was cut off by another on Serafall's. But he didn't stop with just one slap. No, he continued to make his hands rise and that bountiful of the Mao. "Now, Leviathan? Will you surrender to the Red Dragon?" Serafall glared back at him as Issei didn't let up by ing. He wanted to make Serafall scream, shout, and squeal. All at the same time. It appeared that Issei was making her do exactly what he wanted. "Oh. Issei, stop. I am. Ah, oh. Ah. Issei. No. That hurts. Oh no. Issei. Stop. I order. Oh, not. This hurts." Hearing those shouts and the erotic panting from Serafall made Issei's as hard as diamond, and he wanted nothing more but to jam that oversized stick into her little. "Well, if you don't surrender with that, Leviathan, I'll make sure to get you to submit to me." Issei pulled the panties away, and the sight was a delight to behold. Her beautiful bubble, because even the Dragon Emperor had to admit that it was a nice sight, was completely red from the ing. Despite her vocal protests, Serafall's body had betrayed her beforehand, and Issei could see the effects of his manhandling her. Her had been leaking, and Issei couldn't help but smirk as he managed to do this to a woman like Serafall. There was no denying that he was a super, and that he had driven Serafall completely to the dark side. Then he her by the S, parted her with his thumbs, and entered that dripping core. Ironically, he didn't jam his in right from the get-go, but instead, gently and slowly entered her. He was taking his sweet time, letting that delicious take in his as he groaned. The difference in treatment was making her head spin while he just smirked at her reaction. Yeah, you have surrendered yourself. Let yourself get corrupted by my Leviathan. Issei played the gloating role just a little too well. It must have come from the fact that Issei got many of those fools whom he usually fought. So that was why he got those words so well. Serafal had half a mind of snapping back and cussing him out, but when she felt his smack against that burning, she wisely kept her opinions to herself. Issei was first taking it easy and gently, savoring the feeling. Working in and out, he began to build up around Serafal as he began to her. Despite her best attempts to keep her teeth clenched, it was a battle she couldn't win. Issei was hitting her. Sing it. He smirked back at her. Issei. The pitch was a pinch higher but still not good enough for Issei. 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 Like a broken mantra, the dragon was bullying her. Igvild kept on watching through the entire thing, making sure that she got all the glorious details of their bout. Serafal. You're. You slipped, Issei. It looks like the head cut off that idea and she really had to learn to put her money where her word was. Yours is pretty red. Do you want to make it so red you can't sit? She was not willing to test out that theory. She was so much higher than him in terms of hierarchy, but Serafal knew better than to test him out. Issei had grown up so much during his trysts. Ever since he crossed that line with so many women, his confidence had boosted and nothing in the world could bring him down. I asked you a question? Issei didn't let up with screwing that body of her while Serafal began to buck against him. No, Issei, Serafal answered, which made Issei smile as he turned her head. The followed up and the frantic moves showed that he was getting closer. Serafal couldn't escape his grasp, but Igvild guessed that she must have gotten. Igvild had guessed it was the way that babies were made like that, although, from the looks of it, sentient beings, the terms that were used for all creatures like devils, humans, angels, gods, and dragons. The more I see of my king, the more reasons I keep him happy. Oh, make her. Her body was strong and voluptuous, like Serafal. Igvild would be able to handle Issei for a good bit. Oh, that thought alone was like adding fuel to an open fire. The third video opened with Issei again, putting the camera on, and the grave message had done something to her drive. This video is made, not just for my own pleasure but to save in case I ever need it. Igvild wondered what he could mean with that, but there had been something that pulled her away. She believed that Kaneko referred to that as a jump scare, a staple trope in the thing called horror movies which Akino was so fond of. Igvild found that she didn't like that very much, but watched how Issei got the scruff of his neck and Serafal dragged him to the Issei, come on. I wanna. The way she hiccuped and carried herself, Igvild had heard about it. The state Serafal was in could be referred to as drunk. It occurred when sentient beings had consumed too much alcohol. The queen didn't ask about it but found that the said drinks were forbidden in the house to prevent Rosweiss from going on another rampage. Igvild was not exactly stupid and she could see that this Serafal was drunk. She was also stark and her head Issei and forced it right near her cooch. Now that dragon boy. Her? Igvild couldn't imagine that it would feel good, or that Issei would accept. Prying stuff. Was it that bad? Or would Rosweiss react in another matter? Curiosity had been in her mind and Igvild would ask what was so bad on Issei's rook being drunk. She also got interested in the idea of what Issei was doing with Serafal. As he kept the S open, his S began to tease the as well. Igvild began to imagine that his would be much the same as the there was more to it. Igvild imagined that was a naughty word and so she wouldn't say it. Much. Serafal's body became limp. No matter how many times Igvild saw that, it always took her breath away. She imagined that it would be even more impressive when, now Serafal. Or? Your call. Issei asked, which made Serafal grin when she looked at him. Oh, given your excellent eating out, I think that ing would be most appropriate. Propping himself against the, Serafal crawled in his lap and she stroked over his, to make it. Igvild pondered over the term. What did that mean? She got her answer when she watched the name carrier envelop Issei's between her and push through the of Serafal. How can he make a like that? Igvild thought as he watched Serafal's head bobbing up and down. There were more revelations to the terms that some of Issei's girls used as a hug with a head bob. Igvild watched as Serafal continued to on Issei as he auditioned. It must have felt really good to make Issei sound like that. There were some slight hisses that Issei omitted to which Serafal paid no mind and just continued to him off. Despite her incredible naivety and inexperience, Igvild could imagine why Issei would hiss. Her teeth must be touching his. There came a steam cloud over her face as her brain had made its logical conclusion. She couldn't deny that she liked the sight of Issei ing Serafal. Or the image of Serafal ing Issei. The ferocity increased from Serafal's end as she began to go even faster after the dragon, whose hands on the head and bob along. Oh, Sarah. That must have been a nickname for the Mao. Igvild hoped that she would get another one aside from Diva. There had been a small smirk on Serafal's face as she continued to Issei off. Igvild wondered how she knew, but there had been no surprise as Issei unloaded in her, just as she buried her face right in his crotch while he groaned. There had been more curiosity as Serafal opened her, showing the... It was empty. She drank it? I wonder how it... Again, her face lit up like a Christmas tree. Well, that was fun. Now, it's time for the other bits. Issei couldn't react back at her quip. She pinned him to the, aligned his delicious and large right at her, and slammed down. Serafal. Issei gasped out in the open while the Leviathan just began to ride him like crazy. Trying his best to keep up, Serafal just used those S of her in the way that she liked while her S bounced up and down. They were than most would give her credit for. Igvild couldn't imagine how Issei would keep up with her. Yes. Harder. Oh, come on. Dragon boy. Faster. Faster. Faster, I say. Don't make me go down there. Bing his hands, she set him on that magnificent rack and let Issei those big ties. Igvild's cast turned downwards and she smirked. Her own rack could easily defeat Serafal's. Oh. That is the good stuff. I feel so good. Hey Issei. Igvild found that she had watched enough on that. Her own fantasies were going wild and she vowed that for her own sanity and body, she would take it easier. Closing the video, she found that she had seen enough. Ideas were all nice and good, but she found that the forbiddance of alcohol in the house of Haida was a rule that she found hard to live with. There were many more videos, but she decided that one would be enough for her. Opening the video, it was the same setting as before, but there was first nothing happening in the room. Skipping along in the video, after an hour or two, could finally see some movement. Her eyes widened when she recognized the girl in Issei's lap. It wasn't Serafal but Revel, Issei's bishop. What is she doing there? She mentally lamented that it was a stupid question when she watched how Issei and Revel were ing in that. It would be even more than ing when she watched how the of the Phoenix girl had been Issei's. It made her swoon. The one that also struck her as odd, or rather, funny, was the fact that Issei was from the waist up but still had trousers on. Revel, on the other hand, was still fully dressed. She could imagine that they would undress later, although from the looks of it, Issei and Revel were not thinking of doing that at all but just to continue ing each other. Ravel's hands were touching all over Issei's body, and Igvild wondered why she missed Issei looking that good. Slim, yes, but muscles well defined, due to the nature of his life. She did admit. It made a very attractive look. Oxygen became needed, but when another fresh breath was taken, they started ing again. Their S didn't let go from the other, but Igvild looked at Issei's hands as they fumbled around the clothing. Something told her that he was trying his best to undress Revel, but her clothes were sitting in the way. Intricate dresses were not suited for the matters of love, so Igvild made the note that if she did this, she would either wear something simple or appear. It would become clear that Issei would like that very much, given her own body and the fact that she was stacked. Igvild cracked a smile when she watched how Issei became more frustrated while their S didn't let go of each other. Revel hadn't moved from her spot and kept on ing Issei while teasing his arms. The smirk that she was so known for, her cutesy nature, had been still involved, even when it came to matters in the room. But it appeared that Issei's patience had worn thin as he simply placed his hands on the side of the dress. The rip that followed on the clothes made Igvild sigh. Letting go of there, Revel glared back at the dragon. Was that necessary? You know how expensive those dresses are. Issei rolled his eyes back at her as he cupped her chin. I can buy 10 of them and don't even notice on my bank. But I do notice that I have needs. Ravel's eyes turned down, and she gulped when she watched Issei's fully typical. The boyish smile did little to calm her nature. In fact, it infuriated her just more. Before either could do something more, the door flung open and Serafal crashed into the room. Serafal? Serafal-sama? The two younger devils jumped up from the Mao that stood in the doorframe. Hi Issei-chan, Revel-chan. I am finally done with damn show planning. Revel recovered the first by covering her body as she blushed through the whole thing. Serafal-sama, not to sound rude, but we were right in the middle of something. Serafal's smile didn't falter from her spot, and she just kept on looking. Issei-chan. I hope you don't mind, but I really need to work out a system. Revel-chan, you don't need to leave. You can stay here with us. Issei-chan will have enough energy for the both of us. Revel had been aware of that little fact. In fact, when the bishop, crawled into Issei's, she was nearly always accompanied by Kaneko or Rias, as she didn't have the ability to keep up with Issei for a long bout. Throwing her clothes off, Seraphol stripped off and the two younger devils just sighed. Ravel knew that there was no stopping Seraphol now. So for the current situation they were in, they would make the best out of it. You two can start. I believe that I was interrupting something. Ravel had found that good enough for her hands to reach down on Issei's belt and undo the buckle. One could call her hands experienced, as she had done this numerous times. On Issei's side, he appreciated the fact that he could reuse the belt and trousers. Hypocritical if he considered the fact that he ripped Ravel's clothes off. Shrugging out of her destroyed dress, Ravel showed her body to Issei. Modest and cute would be the best way to describe her attire. When her hands reached down to Issei's, her eyes D as usual. Igvild gulped with her. Seraphol was no question, but she couldn't imagine that cute little raven was able to take that behemoth size of Issei's organ. Still, she aligned her dripping core with Issei's raging, and inch by inch, he slid into that slender body. Igvild could see how Seraphol was pleasuring herself to the image of Issei penetrating Ravel and the S that went along with the sight. It was one to behold, Igvild wouldn't deny that. Ravel, loosen up a bit, Issei panted, which made the Phoenix girl smirk. She knew exactly how she could be, and with her natural healing, the experience was always a thrill for both of them. And other partners when they were involved. You love it and you know it. Now get moving, Issei. The proper, prim lady that Igvild knew was replaced by a demon, and the queen didn't know if it was something to be affronted about or by it. A mix of both filled her body, and she decided that both were good. Issei did do what Ravel so desperately wanted from him, and that was moving his S. Still seated, he pumped up and down, making good use of the springs while they continued to. Ravel had placed her legs next to Issei's waist as she felt the warmth spreading around her. Seraphol found that her patience had run thin, and she pressed her S against Issei's back. You too, can you make this fast? I am getting in bothered. Ravel's head rested on Issei's shoulder and glared back at her. Good things come to those who wait. I am not done yet. You allowed us to go first. Issei flinched at that comment. He really had to teach Ravel to mind her language. Seraphol was much like Rias or Aquino in his. They didn't like it when another girl led them off. The Mao decided that she couldn't let such disrespect come to pass, so she got behind Ravel. Her left hand began to massage those modest S while the right went down to the upper part of Ravel's. Such a naughty bird. I'll teach you how to sing. Issei could feel the constrictions of Ravel around his, and he cursed his bad. Ravel, it won't kill you to mind your. Those words proved to be lost on Ravel as Seraphol began to work the bishop over as she pumped her S up and down, making the younger girl's head spin as she continued to drive up the speed. Well, we can't have you, but the prospect of getting caught made Ravel panic, and hence her. Issei groaned on that action, and Seraphol the head of the blonde. Gunna. Ravel's eyes changed into hearts as she felt. The Phoenix girl began to relax in the grasp of the two other devils and gentle. Don't worry, Issei-chan. I am not going to ask Leviathan to join in. And well, it seems that you are ready for another round. Issei began to think that women could be very lecherous. The queen guessed that he would be sensitive to those actions, yet Seraphol continued to him off. It must have tasted quite differently, but Igvild would hold herself back before she would think of ing him off, with or without S of other women on it. When Seraphol let Issei go, she winked at him, making the dragon grin back at her. With her head down, she spread her lower, showing how she really was. Now hit it, dragon boy. Issei put his right at her and just shoved his member right in. Oh. Sarah, you feel like a ing furnace. Pumping up and down, Ravel was just drooling next to Issei, while she had out his name. Seraphol just laid back and let Issei hit her while her legs moved along. You think that we get her involved as well? Issei knew that Ravel wouldn't be up for that. Doubtful. So it's just the two of us. The dragon could see how Ravel was like that. What a shame. I really like her. The that followed was one full of possessiveness. Too bad. Now let's get started. If it was the three of them making love, Igvild would have been up for watching that show, but she had spent nearly the entire night watching those videos. She had seen more than enough to her liking. A few hours of sleep was needed, and well, she had been utterly satisfied by watching those videos. She could do with some rest. Plus, in that sleep, she would find her determination. If all the girls are with him, which wouldn't be a surprise, then it's high time that Issei claims his queen. Scene skip. When Issei had been called into the room of Igvild, he didn't know what he had to expect. One thing that he had experienced from his queen was that she could be quite unpredictable. Not that he minded such actions but often found them to be puzzling. There was no point in denying that she had been quite a catch for a woman to take in his peerage. Still, there had been some wondering about what she could have wanted from him. There had been some crazy noises from her room, and from what he heard of Ravel and Rias, she didn't look like she slept much last night. They all had those nights. It was fun to stay up late and just go to school tired. If only they didn't have to deal with homework afterward. It would have made it much more fun to have shenanigans in with his girls. Duties had just grown in the last few years, and Issei had been occupied with many of them. But then again, to the victor, the spoils came. If only there were things he could have and keep. When he heard the name of Igvild, it was tugging on heartstrings. He remembered Serafall well. So caught up in his head, he didn't notice that he walked through the door, and when it closed behind him, that was when the dragon turned around. Igvild, Rias said you wanted. The rest of the sentence died in his as he watched his queen, dressed up like a magical girl, sealing the door behind him. Issei felt a big lump in his and his hardening from the sight. Igvild had tried, oh she definitely did, to close the ons on her top but had given up halfway through. That bra she was wearing did very little to hide that magnificent chest that was spilling through. Issei could hardly keep his eyes away from that chest. Not just that, but the entire outfit of Igvild made Issei and reminiscing. What do you think, Issei? There was a certain shyness from the girl which Issei had come to expect from her. But it was more than just the outfit. It was the way she was carrying herself. Shy, inexperienced, and not at all prepared for this. She was lost at sea, and so the warm hug of Issei's strong and reliable arms was how her swimming mind found its way back home. Igvild began to hug Issei back while he stroked her hair. Scooping her up, he carried her to the and sat her down as he continued to rock her. At first, she didn't want to speak, but if she didn't talk, she wouldn't be able to cross the line which would guarantee her place next to Issei. Do you know who I look like? Issei just sighed, and when she let go, she smiled back at him. Serafall. You had been watching her videos? The face that Igvild made didn't suit her at all, but Issei couldn't lament that on her. Yeah. Also, the very special ones. With you in. Issei began to think back. They had done a few crossovers, but they weren't that special if he were to wager. Unless he was not ashamed of his bouts and adventures, and as long they stayed indoors, he could deal with that. You mean the ones where I and Serafall? Issei halted, looking for a diplomatic and graceful term to label their relations. Made love? Igvild helped her king out. That was one way to describe their actions. Yeah. I should probably do something about those videos. I can't have them going everywhere. Igvild gled on those words, but then she looked back at Issei, turning serious. She was also named Leviathan. Earned that name after the Devil Civil War. Issei couldn't count their Y stars to find out that Igvild didn't have too much pride in that name. You did your homework. So why the dress up? The eyes of Igvild flattened and then got filled with an amount of that Issei hadn't expected from her. Do you need to ask, Issei? I'd like us to do the same thing that you did with Serafall. The dragon only had a moment to restore himself. Especially after he found that Igvild's glorious chest was now hanging out, and no, it took all his restraint not to those. You know what I did with Serafall. Do you even know what you are asking? The determination of his queen was uncharacteristic of her, but Issei found no reason to worry about that. Yes. Claim me, Issei. As you did with Serafall. The dragon had a snort in his when he heard those words from her, which made Igvild pout at him. The way the diva acted was making her look even more adorable, but that suited the outfit she was wearing, if you insist on that. But I have to ask. How many videos did you watch? Issei wasn't sure what to ask, but he preferred to be prepared if he had to do fun stuff with Igvild. Enough. I have learned a bit from them. Do you mind if I show you? She took Issei's silence as confirmation from his end. The woman the shirt from Serafall and tore it off. Her giant S bounced free from their constraints. They were large, round, and oh so soft. Those were S that Issei found to be rivaling Rias, but they were closer to Akinos in terms of softness, but Raswise in terms of shape. Issei, may I? She was tugging on his belt, but Issei had learned from painful experience that it was better to undo the buckle and zipper. You can have your fun on my butt, I'll take care of that myself. His hands quickly undid his trousers and pushed them down. Igvild had been the one to pull down his boxers, but Issei was one step ahead of her. When his came in front of her, Igvild gulped when she watched Issei's full length. The queen knew that he was packing some serious heat beneath the belt, but even with the knowledge, seeing and smelling the giant boner in front of her, she felt her lower parts tingle when she watched Issei. Oh, this was so much more than she thought she would be able to handle. But the woman had decided that she would do this with Issei, and well, if her predecessor could do it, she would have been able to do it as well. What do you intend to do? She had never believed that Issei had such a vocabulary. If she were to ask Rias or Kaneko, they would say it was due to Biku discovering video games, and Issei picked up the line from a game that Issei had enjoyed very much. I got a nice idea from those videos. Wrapping those incredible, soft, and warm around his, was enough to make him groan. She wasn't thinking of ing him off yet. Women had to learn how to handle the securities when it was at full potential. Ing was a near impossible feat, Igvild had imagined that. But this way, she could get acquainted with Issei's without her bulging. Oh. Igvild. Keep going. She couldn't keep the smile on her face as she heard his approval. His was burning through her, she could smell his arousal. Igvild found that to be doing more to her core, but she also kept her wrapped around his, as ly as she could. So with that in mind, she began to imitate Serafal and had those wonderful s wrapped around his and moved up and down. Issei was convinced that she was a natural. She tried to avoid any part of his that was not covered by her my flesh. Weirdly enough, her were also big enough to keep his under wraps. Gripping the sheets, Issei felt his mind melting from the feeling. Despite her trying, she could see that Issei's lower head kept on popping out from underneath that immense cleavage of hers. She had been thinking about it, and decided to ramp up her next course of action. Leaning down, her head over the head and actually ed on it before his head disappeared into her bosom. All too obvious that Issei was enjoying himself, and making him as she continued to drive him mad with. It was sensitive, but Igvild listened to Issei, and she knew exactly how to push his ons as she was driving him mad. She didn't speak, focused on the task of pleasing Issei. The dragon had to grit his teeth, and he believed that he was cracking said teeth. It felt so good. He couldn't deny that, but she was extending this show just a bit too long for Issei's liking. It felt great. He couldn't deny that, but his patience was tied to his libido. One was just going great, while the other had been running out. Igvild couldn't deny that it was fun to see him squirming around like that. Igvild, do you mind hurrying up the pace? Usually, her smiles were one of innocence, but this time, Issei just knew that his queen was being corrupted by Akino and Rias. He could read behind that smile. Issei, what could you possibly mean with that? The glare made her down, just a little bit, but then she continued on her folly. His hands moved down to her, and she felt the strength behind those hands. They were meant for protection. Meant for fighting. Meant for ing. She had no idea that she awoke a sleeping giant. One that she would not be able to handle. Issei just pressed a closer to his, stood up, and went to town on those s. The speed that increased made Igvild jump, but she kept still and let Issei those chesticles. His knees were getting weaker, but his grip kept increasing to the point that Igvild was forced to lie on her. Slowly but surely, the sweet s kept on creeping. If you want to, just smirking, Issei looked at her. He was going to, I am going to. In those soft, Issei groaned again as his began. Then he let her go and took a deep breath as he relaxed. That was awesome. Issei found the sight of her examining. Not too bad. Right texture and taste. Issei got from the enjoyable prison and helped Igvild to sit up. You have no idea how many times I heard that line. Watching down, she gulped. His was still fully. You want to continue? Igvild asked, and the darker smirk on Issei's face made her worry. I don't mind, but you have seen those videos. Any scenarios you want to act out on? Despite the many, many women that he got courting him, Issei missed Serafal. It would be a fine way to remember her. Her innocence was overridden by her intelligence. A smoke got out of her face as she realized the implications, but there was no stopping that image. I think you have been holding out on me. And I am kind of jealous of her, Serafal. Issei knew that it was better not to mention the fact that he had dead quite a few amount of women during the last few years. It was inevitable that Igvild was another woman on that long list. Jealous? Why would you be that, my dear queen? There was some glare from Igvild as she smirked back at him. Issei let the woman manhandle him as she tossed him on the, but she continued to stroke his as it grew to its usual length. You had with so many women. And I saw all the stuff with Serafal. It's my turn now. The dragon kept the same wry smile on his face as Igvild began to position herself on top of him. Her ass and hands knew exactly where to guide his. There is no talking you out of this? Igvild mimicked the same wry smile from her king as she positioned herself on top of him. She could feel the radiating heat from his that was ready to plow on her virgin folds, but Issei kept laying down and making sure that she could decide on how to do this. I want to have this. I'll make sure that when you think of Leviathan, it's me. Not Serafal. He hadn't expected such fire and fury from his usually demure queen, but well, it sure was fun to discover new parts from his women. How long would it take before he got the other women involved? Not too long. From what he got from Rias, Aquino, Kuriko, and Rosweiss, they would love to have Igvild in their fold. Well, I don't mind, but hurry it up. It showed that she couldn't get through with this, so Issei placed his hands on her S. It felt nice to have that flesh on his S. Issei, what are you? Steadying you? Just slowly, take it easy but keep on going. She couldn't believe how hard and thick Issei was. Just keep. The woman nodded and was helped by Issei. She began to feel how Issei filled her up. She had felt him between those luscious, but even that couldn't prepare her for the invasion of the lower. The good thing was that her was soaked and it was flooding out of her lower hole onto the, making sliding in that much easier. Issei, you're big. There was a whine at the end of that line, but it showed that Issei wasn't outdone yet. He just wanted to keep on going and fill her up with his vein girthy. Illy for him, Igvild had been wanting the same thing. Then he slid in fully, quick, harsh, but pain didn't linger. Igvild could feel something else though. The incredible fullness, her body being stretched by the in-between, and on the edges of it, she could feel pleasure. Oceans and oceans of pleasure that came in waves, crashing against her body as if it was a shore. Issei didn't let up his grip as he felt the constricting around his. From the women he did, throughout his experience, he learned that the best thing to do was mold it into a hole that was made for his. And the best ones for that were virgins. And it sealed the deal for all the girls he had. Igvild was another, irreplicable member of Issei's growing harem. Their eyes rolled back, their S drooling and their heads falling back. Issei's on the pillow while Igvild had completely craned her own head back. Issei, you're so big. It wasn't a lie. She would have never thought that something that big could feel so good. There was something coming through, except for the feeling. Her body accepting, taking, and craving for Issei. There was no stopping either of them. She was getting addicted to the feeling that Issei was giving her. Issei laid back and gripped the from Igvild. When she was bouncing on his, he could grope around and play with those S. But he would let her get used to the in her body. You're gripping like a furnace, Igvild. The woman was all too happy that she could get him that riled up. There were more fluids, coming down, all mixing together while Issei kept laying on his back, waiting until he got the okay. Only when those S were bouncing up and down, when she him, only then would he them. Until then, he counted on his own restraint to make sure that he wouldn't her. His had only just started to bottom out, and her had accepted the giant in her little. He was just massaging the underneath his palms and enjoyed how Igvild had been trying to get herself ready to move her delightful S. Her breath was hitched, and her head had just recovered from its previous position. Igvild, hearing her name through gritted teeth, made her swoon as Issei showed that he wanted more from her. The queen could see how much he wanted to move. How much he wanted to claim her, and well, the pulsing of her S parts showed that he could do so. Gently, okay. Just gently. The dragon nodded, and when she moved her S up, her own body wanted to cling to Issei's as her didn't want to let go. But Igvild knew better than to test out his patience. So when his had only his head in her, she could see what was happening. It was crazy, exhilarating, and thrilling, and she just wanted more from that. It didn't come as a surprise that Issei was marveling at her body, and when she came down on his, Issei just watched her as his S moved back. It was slow and soft as a blush covered her face. S were coming out of her, making quite the soundtrack with their bodies. Igvild moved back down, and Issei's D through her. She was getting intoxicated by the feeling of her body, accepting Issei as its master. Oh, this feels good. Now, I get why Serafal liked it. Issei wanted to laugh but found that the wind was taken out as Igvild got back down on the in out. It was gentle and warm and soft, and Issei began to move with her. Igvild nodded, and she could feel how her body was getting to her. Eventually, the thing that Issei had hoped for finally began to set in. The bouncing of the in with Igvild, like many heavy-chested Gauls, was a sight to behold. Letting the go, his hands went right at the and he began to play around on the chesticles. Issei. Igvild let out his name as his S dug into the flesh. His index and thumb found her S as they tweaked those sensitive nubs. I have the name Ipei Dragon for a reason. Moving his S again, the S bounced as Issei kept the globes captured between his hands. Igvild edged as she felt her entire body being assaulted by Issei. Now, it's time to really make those bounce. Hold on. Igvild couldn't ask what it meant before Issei rocked his S, and then she could see what he meant as her began to flop up and down as Issei rocked his S. Igvild hadn't expected that Issei was so much into this, but her that were bouncing up and down showed that he fell in love with those moves. He even let them go from his hands, just to see them go up and down. Oh geez. Issei rough. Oh. Feels. Oh yes. Feels good. So good. The dragon went to town on her body, making him drool as he watched how she moved. He finally was making her curse, and hearing those lines, he was savoring them. Oh, that is. Getting up, he captured her between his arms, feeling those as squashed against his chest as he kept on hugging her closer. He kept her close, making Igvild look right at his face as she blushed. Issei, you're too close. The boyish smile did not match the man that she felt in her lower body, and when he captured those, his slipped in her, making fireworks go off in her head. Oh, this isn't normal. I knew it would feel good. But how can it feel this good? Igvild didn't have any other thoughts than just having Issei of her body. His power, his control over her, was shining through, and she was giving her whatever he had been asking for. It wasn't too much of a difficult trade-off. In return for being claimed, he couldn't deny the fact that he liked this, and the way that Igvild was moving made this even better. There were many different ways how one could interact during, and for Igvild, she wasn't sure about testing out the waters on what she would do next. But she did know that it felt good to have Issei's. It was getting friskier down for Igvild, who could only blame Issei for making her like that as her brain was getting fried. Issei. The innocent smile was so not suited for this sort of thing. Yes, dear. The queen, just said again as Issei was hitting all the right spots. How was he doing that? She was getting so close, and he just kept on denying her what she craved. Please. Unbeknownst to Igvild, Issei just had more experience on that point, and he could hold out longer. Not that the constrictions and convulsions weren't driving him insane. Igvild's body was doing its best to make him insane about her. Please what? But he couldn't let it slip. No, he had to stay in control for this entire time. He had taken so long to tame Rias, Akino, Kuroka, Rasweiss, Zenobia, and Isaka in the room that he couldn't let Igvild be the one in charge. Issei liked to take what was his, and if Igvild made him slip, he would have to start the entire process all over again, which just wasn't fun. Rias was his master, Akino his senior, Kuroka a healer, Rasweiss his teacher, Zenobia his knight, and with Isaka, well, he couldn't let his servants run over him. So that was why he drove Igvild mad with, please end this. Whispering in her ear, he knew what to say to make this even better. That isn't what I want to hear. Please say. The blush on her face couldn't possibly grow, yet Issei loved the color that Igvild's cheeks. Issei had a few more tricks up his sleeve. His hand found her that is not. The cutoff made it even better, but Igvild knew that Issei could give her what she wanted and still make it better. She tried to come up with another argument, but when his free left hand tweaked her, another followed. Adding just a bit more, Igvild felt her body, the echo through her body as Igvild fell down from her level, and she got the. It took a few moments before Igvild felt that she could relax, and Issei, how was that? On his face showed that he expected a wonderful, or even something better from her. Fantastic. He could settle for that. He wanted to see how much Igvild would trust him. Sure. But for this, I have an idea. Get on all fours and turn your to me. Igvild was too drunk on else, so she followed the order. She scrambled on her knees, showing that was easy enough. Issei couldn't help but admire the sight. Issei. He heard the from Igvild which caused come from his face. Are you trying to rush me? Please. Hurry. She couldn't fathom how good it felt. It was like she was coming down, and she just continued on it while Issei kept his in her. So big. Igvild said as she felt her body eating up against his. His hands landed on her. It was a new way of intensity that made her body quaver against Issei's, hitting different spots, making her eyes cross, and realizing how much she actually wanted him. The purple-haired girl wondered why this wasn't happening more. But she had decided. Whenever Issei wanted to, she would do this with him. Drag him into a, and just have this boundless and limitless. So Igvild fell down on her arms as Issei kept her lower body up with his hands. Hey now, don't slump down. That was much easier said than done, especially with how hard Issei was ing her own body betraying her by pushing back against his s. There was no stopping the fact that she was hunting for pleasure. Despite his best attempts, Igvild still found herself unable to follow the request. Her was hanging out of her. Her eyes were rolling back in her skull and the drool was coming out in both sets of. Issei didn't have patience in abundance, so he reached down, his hands sneaking down past the upper body. When he found his target, his S exploring the flesh again. This time, all 5s were just squeezing the oversized sweater muffins, his ing over her neck as he devoured that body. It caused Igvild to even further as her body was deep by the from Issei. He just kept her up, while his hands continued to grope her giant, and his being in the deepest parts of her body. Issei, please. The dragon kept his smile on his face as he continued to plow underneath, and just let the woman come undone. But he wouldn't let her get that off easily. No, he would give her the teetering edge and keep her right there. Issei. Ignoring her, he just kept on plowing in her body, making her eyes cross as he just loved the feeling of making her and drool. Despite this being their first bout, the experience that he gained was now applied on Igvild. It made her head spin even more, but the same could be said about him. He needed to keep his head straight to avoid losing the match as her was going insane on his. It really was incredible how good Igvild was able to drive him insane. He began to hoping that the friction was driving Igvild out of her twitching, but it only served to increase. At this point, it was a battle of attrition and holding out against the other. And for Igvild, she heard the words before and her barriers had broken down. Well, because you are asking. Hitting the right spot made Igvild come undone. It was a good thing for Issei that she came before he did because he only needed one more. Igvild slumped on with Issei right behind her, falling down as his rolled out of her. For a few breathless moments, neither could move and neither felt the need to actually do so. It was comfortable, just the way they were now, lying on the other as they had. Issei was the first to recover though. That was awesome. You're a natural, Issei said as he rolled over from his position, dragging Igvild along so she lay on top of him. The S kept coming out of her, as she felt quite tired from the bouts. She hadn't imagined that Issei was such a great lay, but the heiress had found that she would be doing this a whole lot more with him, if her body had recovered from the ing it had received. It wouldn't be for long though. But not immediately now. Her S lay on top of his chest while his left hand had been on top of her shapely leg. It was easy enough for another, and Igvild looked at him. The eyes were the window of the soul and he could see the purest form of soul in her. I love you, she said before her body gave out, and she fell asleep on top of him. Love you, Igvild. He could take it easy. The others would understand why he wouldn't join them for dinner. Issei Haida thanked fate for being so kind to him. At times. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Kerlongsj Evert Orlejov for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.